you accept the accounts of what he said and did as being true, that you won't have any good reason to doubt the Old Testament and to see that it is tied directly to the New, and there's not going to be a way that you can reasonably separate those. You're
But
going to
he
have
did, though. But he did.
Well,
And you can't escape the slavery question, Andrew. Don't escape it.
I'm not going to escape the slavery question. So,
Get him, Nina.
what's that, Caleb? Go ahead.
I said at the top, is this some base discussion about like why they're not really holding on to the Old Testament because of all the bad stuff? Like I kind of respect that. That's what
Yeah, no, is it Caleb?
You can't act like what
So,
Kate isn't true though. Like you can't disassociate the Old Testament and the Old Testament. It's impossible.
You can't. So
my beer is what you say.
So,
That's like a Gnostic thing to disassociate the Old Testament.
I'm not talking about disassociating. I'm talking about looking what Jesus did.
Well, no, hold on, just real quick. So, Nina, the reason that we can trust what Jesus said is because we trust what the authors said about Jesus, and we think that God had something to do with that. If you don't think God had something to do with it, or you think that the authors are untrustworthy, then really, what is the criteria by which you can even say that Jesus said and did the things that he did, unless you have personal revelation? Now, if it's the case you want to claim that, which most people aren't usually doing that, I'm not saying you can't know things about God by way of personal direct revelation, but most of the information that we're gathering about God's nature, at least Christ, or about what he did and said, etc., is through the Gospels. The Gospel writers are tying it to the Old Testament. They're saying that Jesus is the fulfillment of all of the sacrificial laws, that he is the one that the prophecies throughout the Old Testament are about. He is the light that blesses these other nations. These are promises that are given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You know, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is saying, hey, this is some stuff that I'm going to do through your lineage, right? Has to be through the line of David. There's all these messianic prophecies. There's all of this foretype and showing throughout the Old Testament that's pointing to Christ. It's just all over the place. It's pervasive. And you have Christ coming onto the scene claiming to be this fulfillment, right? He is the Messiah. He is the one that's fulfilling all of this, okay? If you accept that, then you can't really take away the Father. Not to mention Paul, writing, nearly half of the New Testament, says, and this is just fascinating, says that Jesus is the one who led the children of Israel out of Egypt. That was Christ who led them out of Egypt. What? What are we talking about? Jesus lived in the first century. How is that the case? How did Christ lead the children of Israel out of Egypt? How is it the case that he is the one that the rock that the Israelites were relying on, or whatever? Why does it say in Corinthians, written by Paul in the New Testament, he says that Jesus, and listen to this, because this is one of them passages, and actually, Caleb, I'd like you to comment on it as well, but just want to read this to you real quick. So this is in Corinthians. Let me read this real quick. So this is in Corinthians, I think it's 8 or 9. Let me see here. Yeah, or 10. Okay. So this is in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. So a couple things here. So let me just do this part first. For I do not want you to be unaware, brothers, that our fathers were all under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and all were baptized into Moses. That's that guy in the Old Testament, Moses. In the cloud and in the sea, and all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink. For they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ. Nevertheless, with most of them, God was not pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. Now, this is recounting things that the Bible says in the Old Testament, these things were happening, right? This stuff's going on in the wilderness. They're wandering around in the wilderness. All this stuff's going on with the Israelites, right? It's talking about all that. And it says, now these things took place. They took place. These happened. These things took place as examples for us, that we might not desire evil as they did. Metaphorically or historically? That sounds like historically to me. That we might not desire evil as they did. Do not be idolaters, as some of them were, as it is written. The people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. We must not indulge in sexual immorality, as some of them did. And 23,000 fell in a single day. So 23,000 fell. That word fell there, that means they died. So 23,000 fell in a single day. We must, and then it says, we must not put Christ to the test, as some of them did and were destroyed by serpents. So we must not put Christ to the test, as some of them did and were destroyed by serpents, nor grumble, as some of them did and were destroyed by the destroyer, capital D, the destroyer.
Andrew, you make a great point, and I'm going to give it to you right now. I think that what you're saying is probably the crux of the problem I have right now with all of this. And what you're just saying right now, Atara, I think that I don't agree with you guys about all of this, but I think you're bringing up a point that I can't really refute right now. I think I'm going to reread these books and see if they do, though. But, Andrew, that's a very interesting idea.
I respect your honesty on that, Nina, but I think that you could take other views about like divine accommodation, or, you know, I mean, I'm not even saying that it didn't happen, but like Paul's talking to people who have a Jewish background or would have been familiar with it, right? Paul himself is a Pharisee, so like, of course, he's going to use stories and stuff that they're familiar with, right, to make analogies. That's the whole point.
Yeah,
and certainly tells that it happened.
Caleb,
Yeah.
Andrew, he's saying that those were Israelites.
He's saying that. So what Caleb does, and this is a massive divide between Caleb and I, as much as I got mad love for Caleb. He's not a fan of the Old Testament narratives, given all of the stuff that he finds to be morally atrocious, right? That can't be really.
Yeah. That's one of them. Yeah.
Right, and it's a major driver for him.
Your bias.
It's a major driver for him. So the dispute, we boiled it down, is like this: should the Scripture dictate what you believe is true, or should your intuitions dictate which Scripture you accept?
Yeah.
And so for me, what I've done, Nina, is I have allowed the Scripture to reign over my intuitions. So even if it's the case that it says that, God drowned babies. Well, it doesn't say that, but let's say David's baby. God kills David's baby. Okay, strikes in sickness, or God tells the Israelites to go in and kill all the men, women, children, even the sucklings and the nursing mothers.
And the goats.
Right, and the goats.
Well, except for the virgin girls.
No, that's not what the Amalekites. He doesn't
That's
say
not that one.
Yeah,
that's not the
Amalekites.
Different one. But Caleb's saying that because he's bolstering his case, right? He's like, well, what about that, right? He wants to bring that up because by his lights, that should be a moral case against accepting the historical nature of these texts. Now,
Caleb, do you think it's two different gods? You think it's a different God in the Old Testament than there is in the New Testament?
Well, I'm not being like a Marcionite in that way. I think it's more so I'd be inclined to think that the Jewish people, if that was historical, that could be debated, but if we grant historicity for the sake of argument, they believe that God was telling them that, and then in a sense of fervor against a military nation, they commit war in the name of God, thinking that God told them to do that.
But Andrew, let me ask you this. But Caleb, if God told them to kill everybody, and they only killed the people which all the time, they only killed the people that they chose to, even Saul, wouldn't that be like kind of the opposite though? Because they didn't do exactly what God told them. Like if they would just make everybody, then I can see your argument for that. But what you're saying is they told themselves, or they believed that God wanted them to do this, and the thoughts that they believed, they didn't follow through with their own thoughts.
Well, Andrew, what makes you think that it wasn't Moses who led the Israelites out of Egypt?
No. It wasn't.
When you read the book, it just says Moses.
No. But that's not the point. God also was involved. So the point is that the point I'm making several points of that thing I was bringing up there. I was just saying
Okay, but not Jesus. You said it was Jesus.
No. It was Jesus. No. Hold on. Elliot. The Old Testament says God did it. Okay. The New Testament says it's Jesus. Now you can put two and two together, but for me, obviously, that's just telling you It's the same thing when it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and he made man in his, and he said, let us make man in our image. And then in the New Testament, it says, Jesus created all things. How does that work? So,
why does anyone care about what's in the New Testament when the topic is about the ancient Israelites? Why does
Right, that's the point that he's saying is why would that be relevant? I mean, I guess you're saying that Paul is giving new revelation.
No.
The
point that I was bringing up about, if you're asking me why is it relevant to this conversation, the reason I was bringing up Corinthians and bringing up the thing about Jesus in the Old Testament is to show that he killed people. Jesus was killing people. That's what I'm pointing out.
Jesus was killing people?
Correct.
I don't agree with that.
Yeah, I'm about to say. Yeah.
So when
Okay,
on like a shirt.
Just to be clear,
I want to see Jesus was killing people on a shirt.
Just to be clear, the reference to Christ being the rock in the Old Testament, and that when people were testing him and they died, it isn't the case that just to be clear, hold on. It isn't the case that it's the first century Jesus, his body that I'm talking about. I'm talking about.
No, I know, I understand.
I'm talking about the
same.
divine person is obviously at play in the Old Testament. And that's explicit. And I'm saying that what this is meant to show is that Jesus is not the meek, mild, kumbaya, peace pipe smoking person.
Well, you can just come to Revelation
But
and show
Andrew,
that.
that's not. But Andrew, the prophecy said that Jesus was given the authority of judgment for Judgment Day. So the only God that was killing people at the time, even if we stick with the Trinity, would be the Father.
Hold on, James. Hold on.
It says 16.
Whoever.
There's no A.
James.
Oh, is that James? Is that James? Oh, we want James here. We definitely want James.
Do we?
God bless you, sir.
It seems like you've been interrupting a lot.
Yeah, I definitely. James.
You guys don't realize James is not my kid.
Oh, James.
Can we somebody? Oh,
Yeah,
somebody say
You guys have mods too.
Social security numbers, credit card numbers.
Let me say something. I definitely want to hear Charles. I want to ask Caleb and other people, not Caleb. I want to ask Tada, Tennant, and Charles a particular thing, but I do want to say something to you, Caleb, that this is one of my kill shots that I've been saving for you.
Now, I have one question, then we can
Okay.
Maybe ask yours first.
Okay, I've been saving a little kill shot for you. And I want to know what you think about it. Okay. All right. So for those that want to take this idea that the Old Testament is metaphorical or it's an allegory or whatever, but it's not a historical narrative. Okay.
Wait, can I just have a caveat to say I don't think the entire Testament is metaphorical.
No. But here's the thing, right? You obviously the criteria by whatever methodology you're going to employ to do that, right? To parse out what you're going to accept and not, I think it's going to be pretty arbitrary. But here's the thing. I'm just going to bolster the case. Obviously, I think the genealogies are very odd to be saying the genealogy and it actually names the people in the Old Testament. It shows when they died and it's named them in the New Testament. And you're going to be like, well, at some point that turns fictional. That just seems really weird. But I think this is the big thing. The big thing, a big thing that I want to bring up is that if you notice when Jesus is on the Mount of Transfiguration.
Yeah, I figured you were going to say this actually.
Yeah.
It's really funny. Yeah. I know exactly where you're going with this. Yeah.
So who appeared?
Do you know what's really? It was Elijah and Moses.
Yeah, it was Elijah and Moses. Now it's kind of strange. Let me just point something out that's strange about that. For people to think that people be mistaken about people and be like, oh, is this Elijah? Oh, is this not? Very weird to take a narrative that is fictional and for people to mistake that.
There are a couple things. If I may, there's a couple things I was going to say because it's a good point. I'd say there could have been someone who like the story of Moses was based around. Like I don't think it's like necessarily so like it could be that person, right? So it's not like it needs to be rolling your eyes at this. So it could have been that person, right? Another thing is too when you look at like modern accounts. In fact, I was just going to say this. You know, like the Marian apparition stuff, right? People see a figure who they interpret as that, right? So Jews at that time believed that Elijah and Moses had descended into heaven. Josephus mentions this. That was like common that day, and they thought they had to come back before the end of time, right? That's why people think Jesus is Elijah. They think John the Baptist is. They say we thought Elijah has to come first, and they're really confused, right? So this is already ingrained in their culture. So when they see two figures appear before them, neither of them, by the way, say, "Hi guys, I'm Moses," because they don't know what Moses and Elijah look like. So it's like, how do they know that, right? Nowhere in the text does it say that they tell them this is Moses, this is Elijah. They
could have oral tradition.
that.
They could obviously have oral tradition. They could obviously have
Oral tradition on what?
Obviously, they can have oral tradition about what it is that this person would look like, or they can know, or obviously God could reveal that to them. But the point is for them to see two characters, you have a revelation. Why would two figures appear, and people think that this is like potentially who it is, if all it is just entire lore? Why would they ever think that would be fulfilled at any point?
Why would they? What do you mean? Would they think? No, they think that they absolutely believed it was literal. I don't deny that for a second. I think
Okay, so this is the thing, right? But this is the thing that you started to say back in the day when Ethan was kind of doing the same thing. You guys would say this kind of stuff. You'd be like, well, they thought it was literal. So then you have things like this. Then you have to go so far as saying.
Ironically, Ethan would probably disagree with me now. I think he would.
Now he absolutely would disagree.
Oh no, he would. Because I would use the same argument with some of the Marian stuff he was going to say. But go ahead.
But here's what you have to do now. Here's what you guys would have to be saying. You'd have to be saying that Jesus is wrong.
No, I don't think Jesus ever said this Moses and Elijah, does he?
No, I'm saying that I'm saying if you say that Jesus thought this, you can't have Jesus being wrong.
That Jesus thought that it was Moses and Elijah?
That Jesus thought anything about, any of the texts that we might bring to bear where he's saying something it appears as though he's saying this is historical, literal.
Well, no, but hold on, that's not true, because Jesus is talking to an audience and is accommodating to them, and I don't think it follows at all that he has to believe it.
No, I'm saying, because I'm saying one of the things that you guys would say would be like, well, Jesus possibly believed that, and I thought that was I
don't know what the incarnation entails, to be honest. Like, how it says Jesus grew in knowledge. I don't know how much of the incarnation he was like.
You can't have him having false beliefs, though, right? He can't believe something. He can't have false knowledge.
I'm inclined to think you're right, but that's where it gets kind of difficult. Like, did Jesus think that he was going to come back in that lifetime, like in that generation, right? Like, he says he doesn't know the hour of the day, so I'm inclined to think he acknowledges he doesn't have that knowledge, but he sure seems to imply that very heavily. So I don't know if I'm inclined to think that he didn't, and the disciples misunderstood that, but it's hard to know either way, So I'm inclined to think, no, Jesus probably did not have false beliefs, at least like with that stuff, but he might be talking to an audience where that's not relevant, right? He's trying to give the point spiritually, and so he's not giving them a history lesson. He's not giving them all that stuff, right? So I think he can reference it and not think that it's literal, just like, we talk about this, like, that there's places in the New Testament that reference books that are not in Scripture that the authors believe were real, right?
Yeah.
And like that doesn't bother me. Yeah, no. Like in 2 Timothy, I'll say it's Paul for the sake of argument, right? He mentions Jannes and Jambres, who were the Pharaoh's magicians, right? Now, Exodus never once mentions their names, right? He's getting that from a later, like, apocryphal text. Or maybe it's like Jewish oral tradition. So is that true that their names are Jannes and Jambres, even though Exodus doesn't mention it, and it wouldn't have been like in any of the contemporary sources?
Yeah, because he's being inspired by the Holy Spirit.
So how would Paul know that? I mean, clearly Paul's getting this from older traditions that are not in Scripture, though.
Well, Paul's getting all kinds of metaphysical theology that he never, that's...
When you say he's getting are you thinking that this is, like, downloaded into his brain? Like, I'm not sure what your idea is.
When he says the Spirit says expressly, what do you think that means?
I think that Paul has a sincere... When people say that the Spirit told me this, I think Paul has a very sincere feeling in him, and he feels convicted to say something.
Okay.
Just like many people do.
Right, but he's making claims that he couldn't, that aren't, like, he has no way of, like, he would just be saying stuff. He's going to be making claims about certain truths, how certain things are being fulfilled in Christ, or how you can just eat whatever you'd like, and some people honor one day over the other, and you can honor any day alike, and that Christ is the substance of the Sabbath, things like that. Yeah. How can he make claims like that if it's the case that, like, where's he getting the confirmation that those are true? And
I'm saying it was with discussing it with the disciples, like that he talks about in Galatians. It was with, he does say that the gospel I preach did not come from man, it comes from heaven. So, like, I think he feels convictions from the Holy Spirit. I mean, there's a few times where he has, like, visions of heaven, but I'm not sure if that's where he's, like, getting information.
So my point is when he's making claims, it's either the case they're inspired and they're, actually true claims, even if they're things that he would have no personal way of validating, or they're not. And I don't
I think that they can be inspired, but not, like, literally historically true. Again, we're talking about like I think the point that Paul's making about God overcoming Pharaoh's magicians is what he's getting at. Whether like the technical details of was this their actual name is like not as relevant. He may have like inferred that from tradition or whatever, but I don't think it's relevant whether that's their name or not.
Hey, you said Paul said he got his doctrine not from man but from heaven.
He said that in Galatians, yeah.
I thought he said he got his doctrine not from man but from Christ.
When he says from heaven, I think that's what he means.
Okay, but I thought on the page it said from Christ, but yeah, okay.
I have to read the actual wording, but I'm fairly sure that he does say that in Galatians 1.
Okay.
But he doesn't also talk to the other disciples about all stuff, so yeah.
Before you guys change the conversation,
Yeah.
I just wanted to throw this little tidbit. You go to the Septuagint and read where it says, Yahweh says, I am, and you go to where Christ says, I am in John. Those are two different phrases. I'm going to just go on mute and let y'all do the research, and we can talk about it later. Go ahead. Continue.
Okay. I don't want to forget what you just said. Just the last thing I said on mute, I know Caleb had a question. Whoever wants to come is totally cool. Just one more thing. So, Caleb, what do you do with the fact that throughout the New Testament it says that you have various people referring to being from certain tribes, okay? So, Paul being from the tribe of Benjamin, you have Jesus being through the line of Judah, it has to be the line of David from the tribe of Judah. Is it the case that that's true? Because these promises were given, and they make it seem as though that needs to be fulfilled. If this is just some lore, that wouldn't make any sense. It would have to be the case. There would have to be a literal historical Judah and King David. Otherwise, it makes no sense, and it makes no sense to put the effort into to try to explain how Jesus is of that line if there isn't any of that line. If there is no tribe of Judah. So not just the line of David, the tribe of Judah, which means
Well, I do
12
think
tribes.
David existed, by the way, but
No, I know. And I'm
Yeah.
saying not just the line of David, because I know you'll acknowledge that David existed. But
Yeah.
I'm talking about the 12 tribes of Israel. Now we're getting back into the good stuff.
yeah, that's a little harder to make. Well, sure, no. The point is to say that the tribes are. I mean, you have people today who will tell you what tribe they're from, right? In Israel.
Well, they claim that.
People-
I don't know about all that.
Yeah, of course, people claim that. People had their own. I don't deny
Yeah,
that. Like the tribes existed.
Tada thinks she's from the tribe of Judah. Anyway, go ahead.
Why can't you start? Wait, Andrew. Why do you always start with me? Why can't you start with those who claim to be Jewish? Start there. Some of them will say
Yeah.
they are from.
I'm not denying that people.
You can't
I'm not denying people really did think, like have these denominations and say they were from the tribes. I'm just saying I don't know like if we could confidently say historically that it goes back to like Jesse and his
Well,
kids, right? Like.
You have to say that Jesus is of the tribe of Judah. You have
Yeah,
to say that these
But the tribe of Judah is you could dispute the origins of how that whether that was like a gradual evolution during the Babylonian exile or whatever. Like, but of course, by the time of Jesus's presence, like of course there were people who had genealogies that were like claimed to be from Judah that he was part of. Like I don't deny that.
I don't. Okay, but yeah, it just seemed very. It just
Are you
feels
saying
very.
they changed Judah?
What?
Caleb, you have to believe
Are you saying
in
they
Christ.
changed
The scriptures have said, Caleb. That's what it says. You got to believe in Christ.
Well,
That's what the scriptures have said.
Yeah. But hold on, Caleb. What do you say to what Converse just asked you there? Because
I think it was Converse asked me.
I was trying to understand what you were saying there, that like the tribe of Judah changed or something.
No, I'm saying you can have the tribes of Israel without having to like go back to a literal like Jesse had 12 kids and David was from one of them and all that stuff, right? Like you could say that story may have, I don't know, developed over time during like the Second Temple period, and by the time of first century antiquity when Jesus was around, there had been people who would define those tribes and said, I'm from this tribe and all that stuff, right? Just like you have Andrew, I think it's in the Talmud or maybe it's in the Mishnah, I forget, but you have these Pharisees who talk about the dry bones in Ezekiel, that passage, right? With the bones. Yeah. And there are Pharisees who are arguing about whether this is meant to be a metaphor for Israel's resurrection, restoration, or whether this is a literal, like this literally happened, right? And there were rabbis who said, no, this did literally happen. And you know what their argument was? We have genealogies where I can trace it back where so-and-so was descended from this person who was raised from the dead, right? And they did the same thing. So they could do this thing where they could do genealogy, claim that they were descended from, these people, and that was like their evidence that this was like meant to be literal, not meant to be So that now this is like hundreds of years removed, obviously, but it's just kind of funny. Like you can have this happen. Alexander the Great did the exact same thing with I think it was Achilles, or maybe with Odysseus, right? Who are fictional characters from the Iliad and the Odyssey, but people at the time believed that they existed, and you had kings who claimed that they were descended from these people from several generations back, right?
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but the Hebrews, I think chapter 7 does say that it's evident that our Lord sprang out of Judah, and of the Judites, nothing is said about the priesthood, except for Christ is by the priesthood of Melchizedek and so forth.
Yeah, he was. I'm not denying he's part of the tribe of Judah. I just don't think you have to have like a literal origin founding of Judah for that to be correct.
Yeah, you kind of do if you're making the claim that Jesus is the king, because to prove kingship, you have to have lineage to justify that you're from the royal house or the royal family. And it's always worked that way with kingship. So that's the primary reason for the genealogies of Jesus, is to prove that, yes, he is indeed the king of the Jews, as the accusation that was written on his cross declared.
Isn't it the belief that Joseph was the adopted father? So that's how so it's not literal. It would be that he's the adopted father, so Caleb kind of has a point.
Wait.
No, still literal, because he has
different genealogy
to his mother. So
But
Matthew and Luke also don't agree on the genealogies.
So throughout the annals of time in the book, all of the genealogies have been of men.
No, that's not true.
Jews actually reckon genealogy matrilineal.
You don't even need that.
No.
I agree.
I'm talking about from the paternal side.
I agree with you to that, right? But it's not always like that. So you can look at look at First Chronicles chapter 2, verse 34, and it's even a tribe of Judah, where the lineage of Judah, the genealogy, the Toledo there, gets passed through
because he didn't have any sons.
Right, and through the daughter. Right, so the claim would be Mary doesn't have
inherited, so that the name stayed with the tribe of Judah and not go to. But that's a exception to the rule, not the rule. But what I'm saying is
the lineage passes through the daughter. No, through the daughter.
No, the lineage passes through the father.
No, the woman. Look, the father had no sons, and he died.
No. I understand that exception, Converse. I'm not debating that.
I'm saying that's what happened with Mary.
And that.
Right, Jesus is exceptional too.
You are correct, Charles. I will not take that away from him.
I mean, in fact, he's the most exceptional.
I agree with you. Amen to that as well. But in this particular case, with David, it said it was going to come from the loins, and we all know what that means. So So when they discuss, one of the arguments is that in Luke, that is the Levirate marriage, and that in Matthew, that's Joseph's lineage. So all I'm saying is that Caleb has an argument because Joseph is the adopted father, and he is the one that when Mary and Joseph were going back to Bethlehem, I want to say. Y'all know the story. It was based off of the kingship through Joseph. Yeah. And Mary, the only thing we can really determine is that Mary could be a Levite because her cousin was a Levite. So,
No, but
what's the name? Wasn't a Levite. What's her name?
Yeah, you're talking about Elizabeth,
yes,
Zachariah's wife. But just because they're cousins doesn't mean that Mary's a Levite. That's
you don't think so?
Oh no, not at all.
No, I'm not saying like I'm not saying that it's fact. I'm just saying there could be an argument for her being a Levite.
No, not at all. But if I could give some gentle pushback on a couple of things that you said real quick. Just gently and gentlemanly, because that's how my pushback is going to be. So Jesus' claim to the throne has to be through his earthly connection, which is his mother, because the New Testament teaches a virgin birth. So therefore, Joseph's genealogy does not result in the progeny Jesus, right? His connection is through his mother. And daughters can be the fruit of a man's body. I'm not going to pretend that the daughter of my son is not the fruit of my body. She definitely is. And I am related to the father of my mother. I am the fruit of his body, even though my only connection to him is through a daughter. So, while the general rule is, of course, a patrilineal reckoning of genealogies, we see that even throughout the genealogies of Jesus. With rare exceptions, do they even include a woman? But we have to acknowledge exceptions to that rule, as the good brother Converse pointed out in First Chronicles chapter 2, which is a great place to point that out. And there's another place where the inheritance of land was up for grabs because a man had no sons and he was a landowner in Israel. And they actually went and convened and had a ruling that the land could go to his daughter. But they had to, thank you.
Sorry.
But that's a heritage.
But that had to be adjudicated, right? Because it was an exception, and we have to agree that because of the virgin birth, Jesus is the most exceptional case that we could even fathom. So it's not going to go according to the general rule. It's going to walk according to the exceptions, because the exceptions are what actually qualify Jesus to be the fruit of David's body through his mother, and therefore heir to the throne.
But Charles, it would be the seed, and women. I mean, women don't carry seed.
You mean to tell me that you don't? And
I just bought this grocery store, and I have a big surprise for everyone.
Serpent's head. You mean to tell me that you don't carry seed in you?
Not with her whatsoever. She hasn't noticed
Are you
that.
serious?
And
So that your children are now relatives of her father.
And you guys are very own nutritionist and personal trainer.
Oh my gosh.
What have I also told you? We built you beds, give you showers, make it a lot more enjoyable. Wow. I mean, what's kind of making this hard for you?
A wife and 2 kids.
Okay, that's a lot. Big decision.
This opportunity will never form ever again. To have this much money in front of us.
I knew it was not going to be that easy. Like, I guess you weren't 2 years old. And the problem is,
Games.
Are you in the matrix, Charles, or is it me?
While he's getting adjusted, hold on, I promise it'll be like less than 20 seconds. Mark, are you there real fast? He's not.
Sorry, what's up? I wasn't paying attention.
No, you're good. It's fine. All I was gonna say is I was just scrolling through Substack and I saw that Ethan said that he reworked his article, and like he basically said that I'm not going to you already got debunked, and I'm not going to if you see anything from Mark Grant or not respond to anything I write, you should just assume inferentially that it's probably bad, because it's just something that he worded.
Originally, worth of the day.
I don't know what it is. He just is he's just a firecracker, isn't he? He's just very, I'd say no.
He's all ridiculous and childish, and his objections aren't actually any good. But
I don't
a few
really
days to respond.
have any comments on the actual substance of the argument. I just meant the attitude is what I was kind of taken aback about.
A year of liability.
Caleb, you didn't see anything doesn't from the Ethan debate.
I just saw the Fatima one, but I mean,
He called Mark, where he talked about Mark Grant, who had the most bizarre response imaginable.
I guess I'm definitely, and you're stirring the pot quite nicely here, Caleb. I definitely want to jump into this.
Ask you one final.
You just wanted to bring
Well, but Andrew, do you think that Ethan can be a little overly
that's
uncharitable, maybe is the word I'm looking for?
Andrew you're talking about. He loved him some Ethan.
I
Like, that's like talking about his
but I will say.
I know he does.
I will say.
If he didn't think homosexuality was a sin, I'm sure he'd marry him. But like, it's
What?
you know.
It's the truth, Charles.
No, it's probably.
He has a second witness for that one.
Look, there's probably some truth there, but here's the thing. I haven't really seen him do.
Oh my.
I haven't seen him do the meltdown thing. Ethan's awesome, Charles. Even the people here that are critiquing him recognize.
Watch the debate and then make your decision. Don't let
Even people
Also-
here, Tadaj just out of her brain right now. But even the people here who are critiquing him recognize that he's
very smart. It's just that, again, I think that he likes to. He has now gone from like, you know, atheist criticizing stuff to like full on like salesman for Catholicism, and it's not. That's what it is. It's not like a, you know, I don't want to make comparisons here, but I like to think that I'm much more honest. Where I'm like, oh, here's how I see things, guys, and maybe you disagree, but you know, I'm not trying to make any like super strong convictions here. This is just sort of how I see it, right? Because I feel like he has an idea where like people who disagree with him are like basically hellbound heretics, and he has a moral duty to convert as many souls to
that wouldn't be bad.
the gospel.
Something bad about that though.
Caleb, no,
I think he thinks that people who disagree are like generally like reprobated in my. I don't know. I just think he's very uncharitable in that sense. But like, I'm not saying that he's not intelligent. I think he would beat me in a debate if we did it. I actually
I'd like to meet Ethan. Where is he at?
You need to meet him.
Oh, just get Mark. Can you put the link?
I'm gonna try
Mark,
to
can you
get
put the link in the chat so that Charles
put
can
the
watch it?
Yes, please.
I think it would be interesting if I did. I'm sure I could ask potentially Cameron if I ever wanted to do a debate with him on like, do miracles vindicate Catholicism? But I know that would be a very hostile audience because Cameron's audience is overwhelmingly going to be in favor of that, and they love Ethan. So I don't think it would. It would not be going well in terms of.
There's a guy who does like Protestant. He has Catholics on his platform, but he's a Protestant.
Okay.
I will have to.
Ask him.
But like the Voice of Reason was on his channel, but he has a lot of, and they do Protestant Catholic debates. So
Sure, and I don't know enough about Catholicism to like critique it like fundamentally. It's more about just the miracle stuff, which is what he's trying to do, and obviously like that's, you know, we both kind of share that area. Even though I think I was doing it first, that's fine. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
He does more of the vindicatory stuff, which is interesting. But I guess I just like he literally in the debate on Fatima, I think he said that we can have moral certainty was the term, and that is like so just crazy to me to think that you can have like that degree. It's like, yeah, I think miracles are a decent argument for theism, but like moral certainty is like such a ridiculously high bar.
How did you get more than one salvation? How were you able to jump that?
Yeah.
Andrew, you see what's happening here, right? Andrew, you see what's happening here with your hero, right? Caleb was the known guy who was going to potentially, allegedly, at some point in the future, do a book on miracles, right?
Yeah.
And he's been outdone by a guy on miracles.
Oh, you think it's a jealousy thing?
Yeah,
Maybe.
Yeah. That Ethan guy, man, I'll tell you. You know, Andrew tore his dress getting on the horse with Ethan at one time.
No, look, it's fine. We do have to know anyway. I know you are. No, look, I generally think he's a smart guy. I think he's a good writer. I think his stuff's really interesting to read. It's also just different. I do more healing stuff. He does more of the specific, like, vindicatory stuff, which is fine. It's not like a competition or anything. I think it's just the tone and the confidence that he has is where I take issue with it.
And Caleb, even scarier. What if he's right? But yeah.
Andrew, do you believe that there's more than
I
one
already
salvation?
insinuated to you that I already told you that like the other day when we were talking, he was like kind of insinuating that he thinks I'm going to hell. Like, you know, like
yeah. Well, bro, I mean, look, examine yourself, right? So I do think that these you know, I don't just look. I don't think Ethan should be being like rude to people, but if he feels like he needs to jar people and wake them up, maybe that would be the approach. I don't know. I haven't looked at what he said. He hasn't done this stuff that's really condescending. I haven't seen him be like that. But if that's what it was, that was
just like even interrupting people in debates and stuff like that. Like I feel like he talks for 80% of it, and it's not even like a dialogue; it's like a lecture. Haslip is the same thing. I don't know. That's my experience. Maybe.
To be fair, Caleb, a lot of time he is just lecturing the people because they need it.
Okay, but see, that's the attitude of it because they need it. I think that's where it's.
Well, no. But I'm saying But when I'm saying
Caleb, Andrew is going to fall into those false prophets.
Hold on. Because when I'm saying that he needs it, or they need it, I'm saying that they're not up to date with the very material that they're to debate. So the point is he has to inform them about what it is that they're even trying to debate. That actually happens a lot. And like with the debate that he had with the fine tuning guy, the guy who's going to debunk fine tuning, that was just Ethan teaching him through the whole debate.
Sure, I didn't watch that one, so
yeah. So, but anyway.
Andrew, did you watch the Latina debate?
Why is this even a big deal?
But
I think Caleb just had his like remarks. And
we can move on with it. I don't want to make this a I don't want to make this meta. I don't want to gossip about it.
It's not, and
that would not be
matter
stuff.
Obviously, we can all have our remarks. I'm actually trying to get back to what we were talking about, which is what I want to ask you. Which is what I want to ask
something quickly.
Yeah, go ahead, Charles. Hit it, brother.
See, all this time has passed and nobody has acknowledged the undisputed queen of Clubhouse, Queen C'est La Vie. So I just want to say hello to her. Like, it's amazing. Nobody's acknowledged her. Like, what's wrong with y'all?
I acknowledged her, brought her up and made her a mod.
Yeah. It's because she's such a staple, it's almost goes without saying. It's one of those things.
No, we can't go without saying. We need a verbal.
Shout out to, I want to thank God and my mom and dad for making me.
Hi, Charles laying in on a little strong here.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's good. It's good. And you admit we're going to get a little preaching at Charles at some point or two. I hope.
You're gonna get some good stuff.
We're going to get a mini sermon. I want to hear it. But let me just say this real quick. Caleb, I wanted to ask you. God makes a covenant in the Old Testament. Those are with people, right?
Yep.
Has to be, brother.
What's your objection? You're saying he would have
It's not my It's not what's my objection. So he's making a covenant with who?
Oh yeah, so there may have been a covenant in ancient Israel. I'm kind of agnostic on that. I think that's
How can you be? Jesus says. Jesus makes the new covenant in the upper room with his disciples. How can you be agnostic?
The old covenant exists. I'm not saying the old covenant, yes.
You just said you're agnostic on it.
The old covenant. No, I'm agnostic. Okay, I'm agnostic as to whether Abraham literally heard the voice of God and set up a covenant in that way. But of course the Jews had an understanding of the Torah and the Old Testament came around.
Brother.
Well, Abraham was seeing Moses.
Andrew, are you talking about the Abrahamic covenant or the one with Moses?
I'm talking about whatever covenant you want to say that this specifically is referring to. But in Jeremiah, when he says there will come a time when I will make a new covenant with my people, right? What covenant is being referred to there? The new covenant is the one Christ says this is the blood of the new covenant, right?
Yeah.
Okay. He said the new covenant. Yeah. The old covenant is made by real people, right?
Yes, the Jews at the time of Christ had a covenant. Yeah, the old covenant. Yes.
Yeah, and they made it with somebody. Who was that? Yeah, where'd that happen? Where'd that happen?
Where did the covenant come about?
Yeah, where'd the covenant happen?
Oh, I mean, traditionally it came from Abraham and then subsequently Moses.
So there was a guy named Abraham. There's a guy named Moses.
They believe. I think that's what the Jewish people believe. Yeah.
No. What? How can you say that's what they believed? There wouldn't be a new covenant.
Caleb, do you believe Christ's words when he said, if you believe Moses, you will believe me?
No, he'll just say Moses. It can just be words about Moses is a story. It's like, look.
Andrew,
You gotta hear how Caleb is putting this, okay? Caleb's saying that
being very
he's saying that all of the people of the New Testament, maybe even Christ himself, can have a misunderstanding about the historicity of the characters in the Old Testament. They can think that they're literal, but not actually be literal. That's one thing. The other thing is, they may actually just think they're not literal. And they're just saying, hey, if you trusted Moses, you would trust me, or you would know.
That might be true for Christ. I think for the others, they really did think they were literal. Christ may, as I say, Christ may or may not have. I think Christ.
Yes, I know, right. That's what I said. I said that, right. I'm fair with what you're saying. But just listen. You're saying it's kind of weird. So think about it. If you do the whole metaphor, allegory, it's all not literal thing, or a lot of it's not, right? Or whatever. Let's just assume the non-literal lens for the Old Testament, and let's say the New Testament people thought that, right? When he says that if you would have believed if you didn't believe Moses, or what the scriptures say, you're not going to believe if somebody rises from the dead, right?
Yeah. And Luke.
Well, yeah. Well, it's kind of weird because then you would be saying, here's what you would be saying then, Caleb. Check this out. You would be saying that the text that was written about Moses and all of that, right, in the Old Testament, was actually, so it's not literal, it's not historical, but it would have to be divinely inspired because it's telling people about Jesus. It's telling them the whole point of it is looking forward to Christ. And the only way that could be is if somebody knew the future. So God would have to be the one that's behind that text. But it wouldn't be, you're saying you would have to accept the text as being inspired of God. So you'd be committed to the inspiration of the Old Testament.
You could say that a vision, a spiritual experience, spiritual journey was, which is understood to refer to Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, peace be upon him. Hither is supposed to be, in our interpretation, the Ahmadiyya understanding, it's actually a representation of Prophet Muhammad. So it's the Jewish and the Christian dispensation meeting the Muslim dispensation.
Did you, just out of curiosity in your own life, so I think in order to find out what's true, you have to investigate all of the religions. You have to do philosophy to understand what is evidence, what is logic, what is rational to believe. Do you think such a thing is necessary, or do you think that you don't need such a things to get at the truth?
So research is important, but most people in the world have not studied philosophy. And if philosophy was necessary to understand religion, the truth of religion, then I'm afraid most people in the world haven't got the aptitude or the knowledge of philosophy, I should say, to be able to reach the right conclusions if philosophy helps them do that. Now, religion is can be understood by an average person who uses his reason or her reason to get at it.
Do you ever take seriously the idea that, all the religions are just man's fables, that just like the Greeks invented the Greek gods, that Islam invented their own mythology, because that's just a thing cultures do, is invent gods and invent mythologies?
That's a possibility, but I favor the view that prophets came to various people all around the world, and people just corrupted their message over the centuries, over subsequent generations. The original message gets lost, and subsequent generations lose the way.
But do you agree that most cultures have come up with some mythology? Like, if we went to a random Filipino person, their culture came up with some mythology. You go to Armenia, their culture came up with some mythology. Every culture has come up with something for explaining the origins of the world and where they go when they die and how to live and who's an in-group member and who's an out-group member. Does it not just seem like a feature of human societies that we make up stories for the answers to those questions?
That's again a possibility to consider, but I favor the view that there were prophets to these various peoples in different lands, different nations. The Quran says that we sent a warning to all people, and people change the message over time. That's what I said before. That kind of answered your question.
Yeah, so do you think that every religion was from a prophet that had got corrupted, or were some of them just made up, just whole cloth?
Some of them may be made up, yeah.
I just think it's it hurts my soul and brain a little bit that so there's 2 billion Muslims on earth, and there's 6 billion Muslims. There's 2 billion Christians or 6 billion non-Christians. So the majority of people on earth don't believe what you believe, don't believe any religion. So the default view should just be, well, most people think I'm wrong. I'm in the minority, and that I'm probably mistaken, and that the majority is probably right on this matter. The consensus view is just that my shit's not real. Like 6 billion humans on earth all think, nah, this Islam stuff is all just made up nonsense. And then there's 2 billion people that go, no, this is like the word of God. But that they're dwarfed in number by the people that think it's made up nonsense. You know?
You know that appeal to majority is usually a logical first fallacy.
Sometimes it is. I mean, it is some evidence, testimonial evidence, and the weight of consensus is some amount of evidence. It's not as decisive evidence, but it's just like something to consider. It's also worth considering that, like, when you think of the smartest people that ever lived, they don't just all convert to Islam, you know? And the Quran says it gives clear signs. It's a clear book with clear revelations to make you certain of your, you know, it keeps talking about how clear it is and how obvious the signs are. But yet, the greatest thinkers of all time, the great inventors, the great mathematicians, the great philosophers, when they read, it's not like there's some grand pattern of them finding the Quran and converting. So that, again, the Quran says it's clear, and yet they're not converting. I guess it isn't so clear after all.
Well, the Quran says God guides whom he wills, and he lets go astray whom he wills. So he's got reasons that why people. He says he does not guide the wicked, the wrongdoers. So people may be doing certain wrong things as a result of which they're not being rightly guided. I don't know. Maybe that's the.
But why would he purposely not rightly guide the smartest people?
Intelligence is one thing and a beneficial thing. The Quran encourages the use of reason and understanding in these matters. But it just doesn't mean that just because someone is using their mind properly in a certain field, that means they're also using their mind properly with regards to God's existence and their relationship with Him.
Yeah, well, one hypothesis is that God is purposely making it obscure for the smartest people that ever lived. Another option is just that the smartest people that ever lived look at the Quran and find it not plausible that the creator of the universe made this, and that your worldview is untrue, and that it can be seen, it can be known by people. Very smart people can just tell this. That's like another hypothesis that explains the data.
I mean, you've asked questions about the Quran, about testimony, about sleeping with slaves. I've been able to respond to them. And I'm not a particularly intelligent person, I don't think.
I don't know if you've heard of these people: Einstein, Newton, Gauss, Leibniz, Hume, Kant, Wittgenstein, Bertrand Russell, Kurt Gödel, John von Neumann, Richard Feynman, Stephen Hawking, Roger Penrose, Noam Chomsky, Darwin, Blaise Pascal, Spinoza, Turing, Terence Tao, Quine, Popper, Ed Witten, Carl Sagan, Marvin Minsky. I can keep going. There's just unbelievable geniuses. And they just look at the Quran and they go, oh, this is not plausible. And they just don't even think it's even worth kind of discussing. And this is like the general tendency of the smartest people that ever lived, is to not convert to Islam. And some of the smartest Persian minds went away from Islam. People like Al-Razi, Amari, Al-Rawandi, they were part of the Islamic Golden Age in Persia, and they also left Islam. So it seems that when you become more educated in philosophy, in science, more intelligent, you tend to leave Islam rather than joining Islam. And so that's evidence that this is just not true.
I'm not sure these people have studied the Quran and understood it. But so far the questions you have been asking about Islam, the Quran especially, I've been able to respond to satisfactorily, at least to me. And you weren't able to counter the testimony issue or the sleeping with slaves issue. You did mention about slavery. I didn't get a chance to respond to that. The Quran actively encourages the freedom of slaves. In fact,
I looked up the academics of Islam, so people who study the Quran, late antiquity, Arabic linguistics, early Islamic history, Quran manuscripts. So I looked at the academics of them, and I saw if the people who spend the most time studying these texts in the context, or that they reliably convert to Islam. And the answer is no. Most of them are atheists and don't convert. So again, the Quran says it gives clear signs. And then the people who are studying, the academics that are studying Quranic manuscripts and early Islamic Arabic and all that stuff, people have direct access to all this stuff. They don't convert. Neither do the smartest people that have ever lived convert. And you should just pause and go, the people that are most likely to convert, experts on these manuscripts, and then also just the smartest philosophers ever, they're not converting. Maybe they know something that I don't know. Maybe they have access to different evidence and better arguments that I don't have. And maybe they should be open to maybe Islam's not true. Maybe this is like a superstition. One of the many of thousands of religions that have just been made up by a culture.
so, I became agnostic when I was at university and developed faith after that. So, what are you going to say about that?
That you can then lose faith again. That a person changes their mind over their lifetime as they consider more evidence and reason about it more.
I mean, you have to present the evidence of these people and their arguments against the Quran. Leave the Hadith aside because, if it's not according to the Quran, I'm not going to accept it. So, if you can give me evidence from the Quran that, there are flaws that cannot be explained,
Well,
I would have more reason to sympathize with your view.
have we talked about the point about how because there's so many religions, the default isn't 50-50. The default is that any religion you consider isn't true. So like if I just randomly open up some random book on some Druid religion in ancient Brussels, okay, that's probably not the true religion because most religions are false. So it's not that I need some extreme amounts of evidence to show that Islam is false. The default is that every religion is probably not true and that they need a lot of evidence to go against the fact that there are thousands of religions that are all mutually contradictory to each other. Do you understand? So the default is if you don't prove that religion, that Islam, the Quran, was created by the creator of the fucking universe, the default is that you just shouldn't believe it.
So, I mean, my knowledge is more related to the Quran than any other book, or about Islam than any other religion. So if you can establish that Islam is false, especially from the Quran, then I would be inclined to sympathize with your view. But if you're just talking hypothetically, then, in my view, I've already explained to you that religions were corrupted over the generations following the prophets. If you can, so there would be some truth in most of the religions, some element of truth in them, which I would find consistency with the Quran, to be consistent with the Quran. If not, then maybe it is a false religion. That's my yardstick. So if you can establish that my yardstick is flawed, I would be more inclined to sympathize with your view.
So I'm very confident that you can just falsify the Quran. But I'm saying that even if I cannot do that, the default should be don't believe that. If I told you right now, I am a prophet of God, you should think probably not. Because most people who say they're prophets of God are in fact liars or insane. So the default should be, don't believe someone that says they're talking from God unless they show very extreme evidence. But I'm happy to just show you what's wrong with the Quran and why it's just false on its own, like for its own sake. But you should understand that the default is just that you shouldn't believe someone saying that they're a prophet. Because most people that say they're prophets are not prophets.
Yeah, okay. Many I would say are not. Maybe even most, but some are, and that is good enough for me. So,
Well, I don't think any are, so
okay. But you have to prove it. Prove it from the book that actually this book is flawed. The 2 or 3 issues that you brought up that we've discussed haven't been enough to convince.
okay. Well, so if you want to look at just very obvious errors, it says that all fruits come in pairs. They don't.
Show me the verse.
Okay. 13:3. Do you find it?
Yeah, I'm just reading it. Okay, so can you establish that that is false?
Yeah, so what do you think pairs means?
Pairs? 2 pairs?
Yeah, so it says every fruit. Allah created fruits of every kind in pairs. What does that mean?
Let me act on that. Jesus spread out the earth and let there mountains and rivers of fruits of every kind. Could be different varieties.
So, I mean, so there's like Granny Smith's apple and a Red Delicious apple. Is that what I'm talking about?
I'm not sure.
Because I don't think not every fruit has a pair of it. Doesn't have like a complement or a second one. Sometimes you have ones where there's just one variety. Sometimes there's hundreds of varieties. There's not really some system where they all have two varieties.
Okay, go on.
Yeah, so that's it. They're Islam's rules. It said that every fruit comes in pairs, but they don't.
Okay, you got something else?
Why would I move on from that? That just is enough to settle it.
So I did a search on the Arabic grammar of the words used. Zawjani Ithnaini. And it says it's a common misconception to say that Quran claims every individual fruit is a twin. The verse uses a dual form, Zawjani, two pairs or two categories. So I'll have to look into it, what it actually means. It's saying it's a misconception.
I'm saying that there's no reading of it that you could do that where it would ever come out true that every fruit has some sort of pair. Like, there's no reading of it that would save it because there's just nothing about it. Doesn't matter. It could be varieties, it could be genders, it could be, the first ones being two, but there's just no reading. None of those work. So you can pick whatever interpretation you want. None of them are going to come out true. And every fruit has some sort of pair situation going on.
Okay, I'll have to come back to you.
I'll give you another one. It says in the Quran in 25:53 that Allah is the one who merges the two bodies of water, one fresh water and one salty and bitter, placing between them a barrier that they cannot cross. So it's saying there's salt water and fresh water, and then God put a barrier that they cannot cross. But fresh water and salt water do mix. And if you just look at the Wikipedia page for brackish water, that is the places on Earth where they do mix. So the Quran says that they cannot cross the barrier, but yet the Wikipedia page for brackish water shows that they do cross.
So you're saying that this is not a barrier that cannot be crossed?
Yeah, they do cross all the time.
You sure about that?
Yeah, look at the Wikipedia page. Actually, I'll just read it to you because I don't need you to go look it up yourself. So this is brackish water. Brackish water, sometimes known as brack water, is water occurring in a natural environment that has more salinity than fresh water, but not as much as seawater. It is a result of mixing seawater with fresh water, such as in estuaries, or it may occur in brackish fossil aquifers. Anyway, there's just a whole bunch of places on Earth where saltwater and freshwater do mix with each other. It's called brackish water. And the Quran says they cannot cross. So it says they cannot cross, but they do cross with each other. But it's just an error.
Okay, let's move on from there. Do you have another?
Wait, do you have any comments on the brackish water?
I would have to look into it.
Okay, well, it seems like we've got two issues right now where it seems like the Quran is just false, and you want to just move on. Alright, let's move on to something else. The Quran describes there being 7 skies and 7 earths. That's Surah Al-Mulk 67:3. Also, it's in Surah Al-Talaq 65:12. There's not 7 earths, there's not 7 skies. There's 1 sky and 1 earth.
Because the number 7 in Arabic and 70 signify multiplicity. So it's not taken literally. It just means a lot.
Okay, well, there's still just 1 earth. There's other planets, but there's just 1 earth.
67:3, did you say?
Yep.
Who has created the 7 heavens in harmony? Just doesn't mention Earth.
Well, it says 1 above the other. So this, I guess, this is where there's 7 heavens, but then the other one says the 7 skies. Sorry, the 7 earths. Surah Al 65:12. The Quran is about the earths. Allah is the one who created 7 heavens in layers, and likewise for the earth.
have to go and research these verses. Let me write them down. Could you remind me of the verse for the saltish and brackish water?
Mm-hmm. So for the saltwater one, it's 25:53. 25:53.
And
The pears,
the beer.
it's 13:3.
Okay, got any others?
Yeah. I got a lot. I wrote a whole book on why Islam's not true, so I can literally do this all day. So it said that Adam and Eve were created directly from clay, and they were shaped like with the breath was put into them when they were molded out of clay. But we know that we evolved from apes rather than being made out of clay.
Which verse?
38, 71, and 72. I'll read it to you. Remember, a prophet, when your Lord said to the angels, I'm going to create a human being from clay. And so when I have fashioned him and had a spirit of my own creation breathed into him, fall down in prostration to him. So it's saying that you make the person out of clay, shape him, and put a soul into him, as opposed to what we know happens with science is that we evolved from monkeys.
Okay, I have.
Oh, I forgot about the women and children, the future of Islamic scamming.
I'm not by any means an evolution scientist, but
Oh, I forgot about the women
my
and children,
understanding
the
is
future
that
of
the
Islamic
Quran
scamming.
talks about creation by means of evolution. So whilst it does not necessarily endorse Darwinian evolution or even creation or development from the
Oh,
apes,
actually, you care.
it does talk about a process of gradual development. So this verse, I would read it differently.
Willfully.
I'm about to create man from clay, from the earth, from soil. The Quran talks about creation of all life from water. It talks about
I see.
creation from
You care about
from
humans who are willfully
darkish
ignorant
organic blood.
scammers who demand you accept their
So it talks
worldview or
about
be
the
killed.
different
Okay,
stages in
good,
the creation of
good choice.
life. And in this particular instance, when I have fashioned him into perfection, right? So when he's already physically perfected, and then have breathed into him of my spirit, I refer to divine revelation, not breathed into it. I don't know what, or the soul, breathe the soul into it, but breathe into it of my spirit, meaning divine revelation. Fall ye down in submission to him. That is referring to a prophet who receives divine revelation. So it's your understanding of the passage which is at flaw here as to what the verse is actually saying.
Don't you think that the natural reading of it is that they made him fashioned a clay object and then put a soul into it, and then that was the person?
She's
When I
pizza
read
with
it, that's what it
garlic,
looks
and
like
my
it's
day
saying.
with OJ was and is more real than anything a Muslim has ever declared.
Okay, well maybe the other verses just are contradictory with this. Like, you were assuming that the Quran has to be consistent with itself, but Or maybe it doesn't have to be. Maybe the book is full of contradictions. Like that's also possible.
No, in this one I would argue my case based on other verses, and along with this verse. This verse is talking about prophethood. So it says the angels all submitted. Angels don't fall in submission to a non-prophet. They do to prophets.
Okay. Other stuff, which is an issue. It says that ants can have human concepts in the Quran. This is Surah Al-Nami 27:18. So I'll just read it to you. And when they came across the valley of ants, an ant warned, "Oh, ants, go quickly to your homes, so Solomon and his armies do not crush you unknowingly." So Solomon smiled in amusement at her words and prayed. So the ant there's an ant, and it understands who Solomon is, understands that Solomon has a name, that there's such a thing as kings, with people with names. He understands the concept of homes and armies. These are human concepts. Now, the way ants communicate is with pheromones. They fart out various smells that make them follow each other. But no scientist thinks that ants have concepts like this. No?
Yeah, I've looked at this before. Again, not in a great deal of detail. But the interpretation of these verses is that the valley of the ants is actually referring to valley of the tribe known as the ants. And Arabs have these names. Banu Asad means the tribe of the lion. So these kind of names exist in the Arab world. And so reading the Quran, I favor the understanding that this was a valley of a tribe known as the ants. And a member of the tribe said, "Oh, you Nemo," that is the people of the ants, "enter your habitations, lest Solomon and his host crush you whilst they know not." So it's talking about people entering their habitations. Ants don't do this, and Solomon and his army wouldn't be after the ants anyway. But in any case,
the one problem with your interpretation is that if you stepped on a person or a person's house, you would know that you did it. Whereas if you stepped on an ant, you wouldn't know you did it. So when it says they don't crush you unknowingly, that better is explained by the people you're crushing being so small that you can't see them. That's why it's an unknowing crushing.
no, I don't buy that. Because the response of Solomon is, it's not possible for literal ants to recognize Solomon. So
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. It's an error.
Well, I'm saying it's just a misunderstanding. In fact, the previous verse says that they were gathered into Solomon, verse number 17. They were gathered into Solomon his house of jinn, men, and birds, and they were formed into separate divisions. So these men and birds and jinn are not actually literal jinn and literal birds. They are the interpretation, which I've looked into before, not recently, but I was convinced that this is not referring to literal birds, because they are his hosts. And actually, it's not just, there's another verse which says that Allah has taught us the language of birds. So, literal birds. It's not literal land. Move on to another one. You won't convince me on this one.
So it says in the Quran that just like the Christians think that Jesus is the Messiah, the Jews think that Ezra is the Son of God, but no Jews think that Ezra is the Son of God. There's no evidence that any Jews think that Ezra is the Son of God. And the fact that you're comparing it to a general belief of Christians means you're talking about a general belief of Jews. For example, if I say dogs are like this and cats are like this. I'm talking about dogs and cats in general. So if I say Christians are like this in general, then they think that Jesus is the Messiah. Then when I say that Jews think that Ezra is the Messiah, that means in general they think that. And that's definitely not true. Jews do not in general think Ezra is the Son of God.
So I would read it. It mentions the Jews first. It mentions the Christians afterwards. And the Jews had this concept of sons of God, and they were not supposed to take it literally. It meant a servant of God who was close to God. It was not a literal son of God. But if they elevated someone and took the expression more literally, they elevated someone higher than he actually was. And this is what it is indicating. It mentions Jews first because that's where the concept originated from and where the corruption initially happened. And it went full scale with the Christians. So it's not widespread, I agree, amongst the Jews. But apparently there was a group of Jews in Yemen who believed him to be the Son of God.
I've heard that that's not true, and that there's literally zero evidence of any Jewish sect believing this. So you should ask ChatGPT, is there any evidence that this is true? And make sure you ask, not just do Islamic scholars think it, but do secular academics think it?
Well, you're very quite masculine in a way. In a good, powerful sort of woman way.
Yeah, about the same length. I think my ring finger might even be like slightly longer. I've heard this before. Something like this.
But that's meant to be the
But I don't
testosterone.
think my hygiene. Just saying that.
I love
You're
it.
the mods.
She's the high tea matriarch of the pack room.
You got more than I have, darling.
Oh my god.
She hates when I make her matriarch.
I'm never
too.
opening another room again. And I'm going to the hormone clinic to
Embrace it. You're a Yukon mom. You're an amazing.
How did you show me scripture?
No. Did he tell the man to pick up his
I'm not asking who he told. I'm talking about he himself. Show me where he himself did it.
So clarification, are we referring to physical labor?
All type of physical labor not work in the context of the Bible.
Any type of physical labor
Now, y'all know I
or
don't.
doing any type of work is breaking the Sabbath.
Okay.
You should not even get up from your bed.
You gonna make the sister talk?
You shouldn't even get up in your bed. You should just lay down in your bed all day.
At this point, I'm finna get pissed off.
We can't have women getting pissed off on the podcast.
I was enough for me tonight. I ain't got pissed off if I'm not landing my point.
Y'all going down.
Slow down, Steve Biscuit.
I'm trying to say it, y'all. God said y'all ain't supposed to cause confusion either. Y'all cause confusion.
From a place of an atheist. So if somebody who actually believes in God will know that God can eat, that's something so easy for God to do. Like that's something that's so light. But so if you don't, so hold on real quick. So because you don't believe in God and you don't know God, that's why you have that kind of mindset.
Sorry, you need to go slower, okay?
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry.
But also, if you're saying that God could just save the fish, I agree he could just save the fish, but then he could just save the animals too. So then why is Noah getting them in the ark? If he's just doing little miracles for each fish and do little miracles for each animal too. The whole purpose of the Noah story makes no sense then.
Not really, because God could just, when you, like I said, when you're coming from a place of an atheist, you will understand. But when you actually believe in God, God can do what he wants. So if he wants to save two
So why did he even use water then?
Like I said, like, you know the questions you keep asking why?
Why do you keep
Because he
making
can.
excuses?
No, I'm just saying because he can. He's God.
But so he didn't even need to use
It's
water
really-
to clean the earth, right?
Like, you will never get it because you don't believe it. Like,
I know.
it
You
blows
believe
my
it
mind.
because you're what?
Like you're wasting
Today?
your time. Really and truly.
I think you came into a conversation that was progressing pretty civilly, and you just sound like a retard.
I get it. And I understand.
I get it too.
So like I was saying, right, if you're coming from a place that are atheists and you don't believe in God, in a million years, you...
Anyway, what do you think about the flood thing?
My reading of the Quran is that it was a regional flood, and it's not possible for an ark to contain all the different animal species on Earth anyway. He just took with him pairs of domesticated animals that were needed on the ark for the course of the 40 days or whatever it was that there was going to be a flood in his region.
Okay, what do you think about the fact that it says that meteors are lamps used to pelt devils?